officially in session. 7:05, we'll do roll call now. Twyla Jones. Dave Albright. Here. Doug Detweiler. Here. Russ Sipin here. Dean Martin. Drew Ramito. Here. Jenny Spira.
Here.
Jay Magnus. And Kimberly Monticino.
Here.
All right. We're a little late tonight, but I think we can get things taken care of. I will begin the evening with the audience participation, and I would like to throw this in because of the problem that Shannon Collins informed me of hearing audience participation because you're not mic'd. If you do have something to say, I'm going to ask you to go up to the podium and definitely make sure you can, announce your name and address and all that good stuff.
Yes, Lauren Singstock, 2704 Harbor Glen Drive, here in Twinsburg, Ohio. I've asked Gary to kind of send around. I'm doing this under public participation, so you have a chance to look at it as we go through sections. But in going through the charters, just a few things I wanted to bring up. As you get into them tonight, we'll be looking at section 701. At the very bottom of that, I think it might be worth consideration for the commission to look and see that no city of Twinsburg full-time or part-time employees shall be eligible for appointment to commissions, boards, and commissions provided in this charter or as established by city council. I just think those commissions should be handled by residents out there, not necessarily other employees of the city, just to avoid any potential conflicts. The next one, 702, I want to talk a little bit about. We'll get into it later, but this is one that my past is in government finance, and one of the things I'd like to consider is that if everybody's familiar with the school system, to a degree, they have to provide a 5-year financial forecast, and section 702 here would be new. It would just basically let the mayor and with the assistance of the finance director should submit to council not less than 45 days prior to the end of each fiscal year a proposed operating budget for the upcoming fiscal year, which shall contain at least the following: a statement of projected fund balances at the end of the current year and estimated revenues from all sources for the new fiscal year. Currently, the city just does a 1-year budget, and I think they'll be working on that to adopt it this year. But in the past, a lot of input around the country starting to move toward financial forecasting for government agencies. So I think it would behoove the commission to at least consider looking at doing something like that for the city. They do parts of this right now, they just don't do any of the 4-year additional forecast. And although they do capital improvements, they don't really project it out there for any length of time. And I think that those are really good financial planning tools for any community. I've worked at several that did do this and several that did not do this. And I think overall it was more beneficial to do it. If you look in there, you can read it for yourselves, but effectively it would provide for a little bit more detailed forecast in the budget forecast and capital improvements. It also requires that a written message to council and to the public should be submitted with those budgets and forecasts so that everybody can be aware of not only where we've been at, but where we're headed into and where we forecast and see us going in the future. Then also, I think it also has number 4 is a little different. That means that the finance director should submit to council during the first 120 days of each fiscal year a report on the financial condition of the municipality as of the end of the preceding fiscal year, which report shall include recommendations as to whether increase or decrease revenues may be available. The other sections in 706, go ahead.
The last part you said available, but did you mean advisable?
I didn't hear you.
Did you mean advisable? You said available, I just want to make sure I got it right.
Where are you seeing that?
You said increase or decrease in revenue may be, you said.
Oh, may be advisable?
Is it advisable you want? Or?
Well, I think it would be advisable because it usually is incumbent on the mayor and the finance director to if there's going to be a shortfall, they should be the first ones bringing to council and obviously letting them know where they're headed, that they have an issue that they need to increase, and or, it's okay to decrease them too. If they have sufficient funds to operate, they can look into doing that. The other one, and I just throwing these out here, the Department of Law under 706, there's just a few things that I thought I would put in there or recommend the commission consider putting in there. And one is that currently the law director is appointed, is basically appointed by the mayor with confirmation of council. And I think that the law director position is very, very important to any community, at least any I've ever served in. They're very, very critical positions. And I think that there should be some more ties back to city council, with having city council involved, not only confirmation, but with a supermajority, not a simple majority. All of the things that I put in here, if you look at it, I put in bold, italics, and underline things that are new as opposed to what's in the charter today. The final sentence in that portion there too is that, there's no problem, at least from my perspective, of getting additional legal services, but I think any time that you're going to do legal service contracts for more than $25,000, that should involve action of council. Council should be the one approving any of those services, since they basically provide budgets and stuff to the law department. I think it would just be another addition of some kind of transparency there. This next one is just kind of mine. I've been wondering for years. I know that every other department head and people in government are always subject to performance evaluations. However, I've never seen them done for law directors, and I think it's something to talk about and consider. At least every 2 years, they should be looking at doing that. The other one in Article 9, I don't think you'll get to those tonight, but there's one there for a thought that I've always kind of considered to look at, is that there should be penalties when elected people don't perform other than just quote a recall. Those are a lot of communities around the country, not being specific that I know right here, but I think it's something to consider, that when you have people that if they don't follow their oath of office, and they do things of certain such natures, breaking the law, etc., felonies, other than just a recall, there should be some kind of forfeiture, some kind of payment. That always comes back to the concept of it's a lot easier to spend the taxpayers' money if you know that there's some kind of a obligation or responsibility back to you directly. So that's all I'm giving. You guys can read it at your convenience, but as we go through those things, I think they should be looked at. So just my input.
Thank you.
Talk about it.
Can I ask a question?
Please, no, we can discuss this now since we'll be reading section 7, so by all means.
I'm all charged up, man. Just reverse gears. Go ahead.
This question, Chan, is coming from Drew, just so she knows, 'cause we gotta fix the minutes for the last 2
Well, I think it pick up on your mics. Just for the record, my little microphone over there, it picks up everybody's.
Oh, good. So on section 706, just clarification on this one.
Okay.
It says, I guess the third highlight, when you said he or she shall have a minimum of 5 years of practice or knowledge in the field of municipal law. So what you're saying is they wouldn't have had to practice in it, they could just have, I don't understand that knowledge.
Well, the difference would be is, for instance, like you a lot of times will have people in various legal firms that could be your law director. The person who may want to take on the responsibility of it may not have the 5 years of actual experience sitting in the law director's seat, but they may have considerable knowledge of dealing in municipal law. As you know, it's a very vast field, and it's hard to find somebody who's well-rounded in all aspects of municipal law. But if you have the knowledge of it, I think that that's an important consideration, not just sitting in the seat or filling a chair.
It's our last charter review that actually set the criteria through that 5 years in there. And the only concern that I would have is the or knowledge part. It's very broad.
Right.
You could almost make an argument that somebody, I don't know, somebody serving on a charter review commission who was also an attorney.
Right. Well, I wouldn't say that person would necessarily. I think when you have an attorney, I mean, there's all kinds of arguments you can have for the special field of municipal law. And I'm not an attorney, but I've dealt enough in government to know what it's about. It's rather specialized in some regards, but it depends on whether you're looking at an individual or a firm. Those are considerations to look at. And you can either put they should have knowledge or be knowledgeable of. Because you may have people that have never sat in a law director seat, might have 20 years experience outside of that area working in a firm. So you could have considerable knowledge, but not necessarily just 5 years of sitting in a seat as law director. So I mean, I think it's something to look at. It's kind of like, when you do job applications, a lot of times they'll say, if you have bachelor's or master's or 10 years actual experience will be the equivalent of. It's one of those kind of or things I think I was thinking of in there.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Put a lot of work into this, thanks.
Well, it's kind of what you do when you're retired if you get you have no life, I guess.
Hi, Twyla. Twyla has arrived. That's okay. You are right here. And I'll throw this out there, and we have a member of city council here, and we also happen to have the mayor here, and, ever since I've been doing this, I've seen the law director serves at the pleasure of the mayor, and Lauren's discussing incorporating the language of and city council into that. Is there any benefit or any problem in doing that, or is it something that is happening now by default anyways, or?
Well, absolutely happens by default. The council members are always in Dave Maestros' office on almost a daily basis, and they're conferring with him. He has an open door policy, as our previous law director did. The more thing that I am worried about is the word knowledge here, and I think you hit the nail right on the head, Russ. That is so broad. I think that there could be a definite problem with that if somebody wanted to bring in somebody without quite the experience that I believe that you need in that position, especially of municipal law. It's a very, very broad term. And the only other comment I have here is the contract exceeding $25,000. As a matter of fact, the state has upped our contract abilities to $50,000, and that happened about a year and a half, almost 2 years ago.
Okay.
So, that would actually be out of date with what state laws.
Yes, Mayor, I have a question. As far as what he suggests with said director shall serve at the pleasure of the mayor and city council, is there anything currently set up that council could challenge the law director if they felt he was not performing duties?
To challenge in what way?
Well, it says he can serve at the pleasure of the mayor. So basically, you could let him go without cause.
That's correct.
Is there anything set up that council, if you say, no, I want him, but council could say, we do not feel he is representing the best interests of the city and could override that?
I really don't know. I guess I would have to ask the law director if there's some mechanism for that to happen. As far as I'm concerned, it serves as the pleasure of the mayor, as all of the department heads do. I guess there's ways that it could be done, but I don't believe that those would be very ethical ways to do it. Such as lowering somebody's salary through legislation or something.
And for purposes of clarification, I just want to I'm going to speak every so often. That was Jenny that asked the question, just so Shannon knows who's speaking at the time. If you remember, say your name. I'm not going to remember, so somebody remind me to.
There should be a secretary here.
So on this topic, this is Drew speaking. The concern I have here is that the law director would have two bosses. And I think anytime, in the business world, if I had two bosses, one's bad enough. It's really tough to have two people you have to report to. So I think the buck has to stop somewhere. And so in this case, I just think serving at the pleasure of the mayor makes sense. If people believe that it should be at the pleasure of city council, that's another argument. But I think somewhere along the line, it can't be both. I just see that as tough.
I agree, Drew. I think it would be very, very difficult. Or could be.
Do you have Lawrence?
I just received it, yes, thank you.
Okay, Mayor, I mean, I don't know if this is something we can address now in section 7.02 of the Department of Finance, and I would be happy to have Karen House chime in too after looking at this. To what degree does the city do what is stated here, or is this completely?
You know, I missed that presentation, I was in the planning commission at that point, so if you give me a chance to review it while you're discussing, I can come back. And
That's, okay, okay.
Thank you.
Russ, this is Jenny. I noticed on the agenda, we don't have anything to allow for review of the minutes of the previous meeting, and that should be included. on
You
the
are
agenda.
absolutely correct, and we will do that. How about we do that, insert that after the audience participation before we dive into the next part of the thing. Yes? Sally Gaydosh.
Sally Gaydosh, 9250 Liberty Road, Twinsburg. I had a Macedonia charter, and I don't have it, but I did put a Talmadge charter regarding the law director. In Talmadge, the law director is elected by the people. In Macedonia, if I remember correctly, it would take a supermajority of council to relieve the law director of his duties. Speaking of the law director being responsible to the mayor, you have two different entities. You have the law director representing the administration's interest, then you have the law director representing the council's interest. There definitely could be conflict, and there has been conflict. So I think that that's something to really look into. We've had entirely too many failures, and no one is addressing these in the courts. We've had over 10 years, I've explained it to you, and I'll explain it again when you 7A1. We have had 5 failures in the court, and nothing happens. Now, one other thing, speaking about the money, wasn't really sure what but in 2002, now this comes from watching.
Watch your jackets.
Okay, this comes from, so to speak, watchdogging the charter, which I have been labeled as the watchdog and the whatever, and in the courts. And I have claimed that to the judge. That's fine with me, the name calling whatever I am, a watchdog. I am, and I don't apologize. But in 2002, we brought to the city's attention, this is costly advertising, incidentally, talking about $900 for a page like this in the bulletin. But to try to get the message to the people, we've done that. The city of Twinsburg spends over $100 million violating the charter. In 2002. If you look at the charter, you'll find that we do have a capital, or a, what is the name of the board? Capital Improvements Board. It was adopted by the people, passed by the people, was eliminated by council. We really don't need it. So we come to council and say, well, we passed it, it's in the charter. But we had to go to court. They didn't agree with us. And the first thing the judge said is put it back. So the city did, and the committee, the board's responsibility is an advisory body to city council. It includes the mayor, finance director, 2 city council. 3 qualified electors. Hey, I think you were okay. That happened after the judge ordered it put back. Now, for 10 years, $100 million was spent. Violation of the charter. Shortly thereafter, the board was put back. And I'm only telling you this because I want you to know how vulnerable our charter is. Extremely vulnerable. Especially if nobody's watching, or everybody gets a little bit lax and it's more convenient not to have these people. The Financial Oversight Board to be reestablished. The law director at the time said this is no big deal. It's just reestablishing a board that's advisory. The legislation is reestablishing the board. It shall meet at least once per quarter those meetings. But it did get put back in. It was only by court order. And then it said it's no big deal. So if I sound, and I'm probably going to over the next 4 or 5 months, I'm going to bring all these things to your attention. Because if somebody doesn't watch, most importantly is the ballot language. If you look at the charter amendments over the last 5 years, since 2004, we had nothing but a mess. Russ, you were on the charter review, you know we had 10 amendments that we put on the charter review and recommended, and the law director reduced them to 6. We didn't find out until after the ballots were printed and after the election. So there's a lot to be done between now and then. A lot I'm going to ask you to try to consider. Consider the fact that, and I mentioned this to the commissioner, to the council when they were interviewing people. I said, make sure that your Charter Review Commission has all the necessary information before them before these things go on down. Make sure that they understand. The ordinances are written by the law director from the Charter Review Commission. But when they're changed after the Charter Review Commission submits their proposals, and the ballots are written so that you don't have any authority to even say what's on the ballot. What we did, Russ, I think if you recall, we requested that those ballots come to us before they are submitted and printed. We asked that we sign off on them. That never happened. But it's because you have to keep such close tabs. And one of the amendments, so in 2004, we realized in 2011, they weren't properly advertised, only because we went backwards and said, gee, what happened to what we voted for? Or what happened over here? Finally, in 2012, after almost 8 years, those were published in the paper properly. And the reason they weren't published, or is I was trying to do a campaign on an issue and I couldn't find it in the paper. I was told it wasn't published. That's an absolute demand, not by the city, but by the Constitution. You must advertise these twice. And in the advertisement, you have to say, what is the old language? Then you also have to say, this is the new language, so that people can compare. This is the way it was. That's not happening. These publications are so sporadic, and unless you watch the legal news, you can't find them. So I'm just asking you to try, and I'll try to help, because this is a serious job. You're going to find in 4 or 5 months that you have a lot of responsibilities here. So when we make recommendations from the floor, or I make a recommendation as a past Charter Review Commission member, it isn't because I have an agenda against somebody. My agenda is making sure this charter is right. And this charter is absolutely, unquestionably, for the people. It is not for the administration. It is our guidelines for our administration to follow. And that's why, Drew, it's important that there be some sort of authority on council. If they see some lax behavior of somebody, that I don't know, anybody that isn't appointed by the council, I can see, no. But if they're appointed by council, you've got to have some authority as council. I've been on council, I recognize the value. You can't just lay down and say, well, there's nothing, and that's what we're hearing. There's nothing we can do, we have to take the advice. Well, maybe we should put it in our charter that the advice must be in writing. Written legal opinions on every issue. That's kind of foolish. I mean, it's a lot to ask. But when there's an issue and you're in court 5 times, a councilman should be able to go and say, gee, I took the advice of the attorney, the law director, and this is his advice right here in writing. And then, Ross, your situation of what do you do with them, they can say, gee, I did my best. I asked my law director. And if you look at qualified immunity of public officials, that's one of the responsibilities. What did you do before you voted? You're qualified, you're immune if you listened to your law director and you did your homework. You can say no, and they always told you should sue, somebody will sue you, and you'll lose. Oh, they've sued me and haven't lost you. But I'm just trying to say, these are serious things. So when we bring them up to you, it's not to be controversial. It's going to sound controversial. But I'm going to try, when I come up to here, I'm going to try to bring you examples of what we have lived through. Like I said, we finally, 2004, we made recommendations. They were mutilated. Tonight, when the time comes, I'll show the documents. We've had 4 votes on council to put issues on the ballot. You have to have 5. Didn't know it till long afterwards. So if we're watchdogging, maybe Lauren's gonna help me watchdog, I don't know. But anyway, we need all the help we can get, because this charter is absolutely concern of one issue. I can't find it on the ballot. It was a 2004 issue. And it took until 2012 to get those right. That's a long time to get an issue right on the ballot. So if we sound controversial, we don't mean to be. We mean to be able to try to help and get some of these straightened out, because you can see nobody here. And if it weren't for Lauren, I know they would be here. So we'll try and help the best we can. Don't consider it controversy. Consider it, we really have watched this, what we'd like to have done.
Thanks, Shelley. Sally, was it the 2008 charter review where we got our issues were placed on the ballot, passed, but then it came that they weren't advertised? I don't think it was 2004, I think it was 2008.
Okay, yeah, well, 2004, there was a lot of controversy. Remember, we had suggested that perhaps we should have an outside legal counsel give us our advice. Remember?
I remember talking
I
about
got
that.
the letter, and because we were having difficulty with the law director. And he kind of didn't feel like he had to take, not orders, we're not asking to take orders, we're just asking to help. So I think that the mayor corrected it. She had Mr. Webster write us a letter and apologize for whatever comments were made, not to me, to Dave Martin, or Don Martin. So we started off rocky, but we did suggest, and I would suggest absolutely 100%, you hire an outside legal counsel. I think I sent you John Gesterman's, send it to you. Did I send you an email, Russ? John Gesterman.
I don't think so.
Yeah, you said I said this is something that you might have, because you had no information.
Yeah, I got it.
Yeah, so anyway, that's where the recommendation comes, that you might need an outside opinion. Because as you can see, it's here. No big deal, and it is a big deal. And it's no offense or no insult, but it's just a responsibility. We have to make sure we get our best advice. So we'll be here, and I think I'm making your job a little bit harder than you thought it might be. So if I am, oh well, we'll see if we can't work it out. I'll bring my documents. I won't ask you to do something that I can't back up with, an issue that I felt created concern.
Thank you.
First, I have a comment. In regards to the improperly advertised ballot issues. That is correct. That was sent to the bulletin. It was with the directions, of course, to publicize it in the legal notices, as we always do, on 2 consecutive weeks. The bulletin was at fault and did not publicize it the second time, which we were not aware of. When it was brought to our attention, all those issues passed. When it was brought to our attention, we took it back to the ballot, re-advertised, made sure it was in for 2 weeks. But there was no conspiracy. It wasn't done purposely. It was a clerical error on the part of the bulletin, actually, not even on our part. But obviously, we did take it back to the bulletin and publicized it and had it revoted.
Yeah, they were
And then the other issue, according to your charter, we're not there, section 10.01, you will notice when you get to that section of the charter that even though the Charter Review Commission will make perhaps many recommendations on things that go to the ballot, it's still up to council to make the final determination on what goes to the ballot. And if they have 5 votes, they can overturn it.
No, absolutely not. Well, we have an opinion from Mr. Maestros that says that's not true. I've got the opinion.
Well, then I think we need to change 10.01.
Well, and as far as publication for the last, this publication problem started in 2000, 2004, 2009, 2011. It just didn't happen one year. Improper publications didn't just happen as well. Blaming the bulletin
Well, Mrs. Gaydosh, we have the receipt that we sent it to them with the
So who's
instructions for
reading?
2.
Okay, another thing that the clerk should be doing, she should be taking those advertisements, clipping them, attaching to the back of the legislation that, yes, indeed, it has been published. And it didn't happen until we, the public, found it. We said the Secretary of State's got a bad charter. If you recall, we went
Yep.
through all that.
I believe though that clerk of council is not here now, the one that did do that.
There's been 3 since then. And somebody's got to be supervising these things. You just don't hold the clerk responsible, and if she doesn't do it 100% right, fire her. This isn't fair. You get new girls to come in, they need to be properly trained.
Mrs. Gaydosh, I think that's unfair. I don't think you're aware of what kind of training goes into
I do.
And then we're not here to discuss the training of the...
I do know, I've talked to the clerks, I've watched clerks come and go.
We have a clerk now that was trained like anybody else, and she's doing a
It
training.
doesn't, okay, I'm just saying that these are things, I'm not blaming the clerk. I'm not blaming the clerk. I'm blaming, there needs to be more than one person responsible for this. It's not fair to blame the clerk. Sure, she's responsible, but only to a point. You have an administration here that administers this government, not the clerk. Russ, we've talked about that too. And I think your letter to the council noted that you were not picking fault with the clerk. I read your letter that you recommended that they put this, we are not blaming the clerk. Very lax, and so I just ask that you address these things.
We will get to section 10 eventually.
Right.
All right, before we get to old business, does anybody have any comments on the minutes that were submitted?
Yeah, Russ,
Yes.
Drew and I do. I think it may be a good idea, per Shannon Collins' email, that we go through all the yellow highlighted areas of the last 2 meetings and make the corrections.
All right, let's start on February the 4th.
That's what she asked.
First one,
So that, on the bottom of that page where it says motions made by male speakers, that male speaker was me. I had nominated you, Russell. So it should read Romito.
Yep.
And second, and I'm not sure who seconded
I think it was Jenny.
I think it was,
It was Dean?
it was Dean, did the second, okay. I know I did second.
Well, then, the next one, I think is you, Jenny, says discussion from a female.
That was definitely me, because I remember saying that I thought that was a good choice.
Okay, so the motion was made by Drew, the second was made by Dean. And for the vice chairman, the motion was made
I
by
made that motion also.
Drew.
I'm not sure who seconded it.
I believe it was me. Yep, correct. So then let's go to February 10th, page 2 under old business. Male speaker number 1 stated to Mr. Siphon that there should be discussion before a vote. Yes, I believe that was Drew.
Yeah. You remember that one, Russ?
I remember that. And you were absolutely right, so that was Drew Romito. And then under Article 3, 3.02, question from female speaker number 1 to Gary regarding failure to enact ordinances for 180 days.
That was Jenny.
That was Jenny. Article 3, Section 3.03, council qualifications. New male speaker to take over reading. Did anybody remember who was reading it at that point in time?
Yes.
Jay. Okay. And then in Article 3, Section 3.07, it says, our stipend brought up discussion regarding the wording of council meetings. I don't think that I did. I don't think I was the one that brought that up.
No. That was me.
That was
Yeah, because that was what we had discussion. Should it
people
be
working in the middle of the week.
Yeah.
Yes.
So that's what I thought. So that was brought up by Drew. So that is an unhighlighted correction in 3.07. Male speaker is commenting in the background, so I can't guess to what that is. Section B, special meetings, male speaker comments that in today's age of technology, most members would prefer. Was that me?
That was me.
That was Drew?
That was a discussion where they have to hand it, bring it right to their home, but why can't we do it by email?
Right.
Because they all have iPads.
And then on the next page, under Article 3, 3.09, Part B, Clerk of Council, female speaker asks Mr. Sipin if it would help if there was a working definition of what journal means in the charter.
That was me.
Yeah, just do Kimberly. And then somebody picked up reading. Oh, once again,
Dean. Was that Dean Martin, was it?
it was Dean Martin. Started reading Article 4, Section 4.01. Unidentified male speaker has question regarding the primary.
That was me again.
Yep. So when in doubt, just blame Drew.
Yeah, I'm the next one too, Russell. About the discussion of the number of lines of succession.
Article 4, Section 4.04, unidentified male speaker, that would be Drew.
And the next one's mine also, on the top of the next page. I had asked the mayor if 10 days was sufficient time.
No commission member states that in the city manager form of government, the city manager is selected by council. I know that was not me.
That was me again, Russell. Right, Drew.
New unidentified female reader reads the following. That was Jenny.
That was,
Unidentified male speaker had a comment regarding 3.07 in reference to the timing of the summer month-long break for council.
Gary did
That was me.
Yeah.
That was Gary.
Gary Soresi. An unidentified female speaker noted possible discrepancies between 3.07 and 3.11 regarding the time and place of council meetings, not the day of the week. I think it was Jenny too.
You think it was?
Yeah, yes, you were asking.
I guess it's just worded a little different.
Russ, this is Gary. Just looking at the next section there with the requests, Shannon sent to all of you the charters, I think,
Yes.
via email, and I have a hard copy of each here in case we need it for reference. I just wanted to let you know that.
Let's vote on these minutes now. All in favor of passing accepting these minutes as amended?
I believe we need a motion.
Pardon?
Don't we need a motion?
Oh, I was gonna make a
Oh, you were
motion.
gonna make, oh, I thought you were just going to call for the
I
vote.
guess I kinda was, no. I'd like to make a motion that we accept the minutes as amended.
I'll second it.
That's Russ Sipin, seconded by Jenny. I'll call the roll. Twyla. Dave.
Yes.
Doug Detweiler. Yes. Russell Sipin, yes. Drew Ramito.
Yes.
Jenny Spira.
Yes.
Kimberly Monachino.
Yes.
And did I skip over somebody? Dean is not here. All right, so we passed that. They are accepted as amended.
And Russ, this is Jenny. I'd like to request that once the corrections are made, Shannon email all of us updated, corrected copies of the minutes.
Very well. So,
I'm sorry, this is Doug speaking. Is there a timeline when we look at those minutes that we can expect them 5 days after the meeting? Or do we know that, or is it just subject to her workload?
I think it's subject to her workload, but if I'm not mistaken, I think she has somebody assisting her, so I'd ask Shannon that she has them to us by Friday, since our meetings, and we're gonna try and do them weekly. So I think that makes sense. And that's what she had done last week, so.
Okay.
I would like to add something too about one of the bullet points that Gary cleared up, and the other one was need clarification of law director to define the word journal. And I'll tell you what, because
Where is that one?
that is the second to last page of the minutes, the second set of minutes, the minutes from February 10th. So you see some bullet points down.
Okay, carry on.
So Shannon did inform me she is still looking for these charter books, which were handed in by the last charter commission. We did receive from Shannon copies of Solon, Macedonia, and Stowe charters. Need clarification of the law director to define the word journal doesn't mean minutes. And I looked and looked and looked and looked, and I talked to Dave Maestros. He returned my phone call. You can hardly find anything online that has a stiff definition of journal. And in talking with Dave, he would define journal as the recording of council actions at council meetings and legislation. Yes, Mayor?
I actually have a little show and tell thing.
Yeah.
We have these books since the 1950s. And you will see right here, this is from the date of June 12, 2012. Shows the roll call, the absent members also present. This is the caucus. The caucus goes to audience participation, items for discussion. Pending legislations are all listed. Then we go to miscellaneous comments. After that, we go into adjournment, regular council meeting, roll call, absent also present. We have all of our committee reports, public participation, awards and presentations. Anybody who made comment and their comments are listed here. We go to our motions, our mayor's report, department head reports. And here's an example of the voting. We have motion to suspend the rules and place an this is the ordinance 83-2012. We have a motion to make it, place it on emergency, a motion to adopt, and it actually says here upon roll call motion passed 6-1 with Bob McDermott dissenting. It does say who voted in favor, who voted against, and again, these are all since the 1950s. This is what we consider record.
Now, that is not published, but it is available if somebody wanted to come in, because that is far more in-depth than the minutes usually are.
These are all available for public inspection at any time, absolutely.
Okay, so I guess the answer is that the journal and the minutes are separate items.
Russ? This is Gary. I also have this thing, which is a recording, and this is what Shannon started when she started working here. And this is a record of what's in these books, of every single ordinance or resolution that ever passed. And she had been keeping this on her computer, and when I brought up this discussion to her, she said, well, what about this? And she just popped it up and to show that she had been keeping this. So she did add a couple of columns because they hadn't recorded the votes on here. And so she added those and went back through, had someone go back through the books, and all the votes are recorded on here. If there's a dissenting vote, it's noted, and who dissented, etc. Unbeknownst to me, she actually has been keeping this on her computer ever since she started. So this goes back to 2012 when we hired her. So
I think it's a nice backup to this, you know, it's a good record of the legislation.
And Shannon had told me she started doing that,
But we really do consider this our journal,
so. Okay.
actual record of
Lauren?
Following the rules, coming over to the speaker. That's a good idea to have that journal. And my question would be is, as we move into the modern age, is there some reason that we can't digitalize that, get it onto the website, get it into an electronic format so that people don't have to come up to City Hall and look through a record? I mean, most communities are starting to put more and more stuff online for that purpose. And the only objection and point I would put as far as the listing of legislation, although that's a good thing to have, Gary, one of the problems with city government has always been is without a continuity of a existing journal going on, like the mayor has said there, if you don't have that, don't have people start keeping different formats and different journals unless it's approved by council. That's one of the things I would just like to say, because you need to have it consistently kept, because we don't know when historical people want to go back and look at any of those old records. I like the idea of the journal, and that's usually what I'm used to seeing. But, you know, when you ask for it, you didn't get any indications that they even had it. Now we know that they do have it. It shouldn't be that big of a thing just to scan it in and put it in a PDF format, get it onto the web. So I'd just like to see more of that. And maybe if it's not going to be done willingly by the administration, then maybe it needs to be something considered in a charter. Because the thing with the charter is that those are laws that the people want to have and make sure that those things are enforced. You're not subject to any different opinions or whatever somebody decides they want to do in the middle of whatever term. That way it's consistent from the beginning all the way through. And I think the idea of a journal is a really great idea because it's for posterity. It's not just for us today.
I would play devil's advocate here and just address, would you like to see what I'm going to call Shannon's cheat sheet online or that document that the mayor just had? Because when I look at a document like that, I don't know if that covers 1 year or half a year or 1 month. I can see volumes and, you know, space on a server and man hours to do something like that. Like police records. Police records aren't online, court records are. Police records are. You have to go to the police station if you want to see something. I don't know. It seems to me like with city government that runs relatively thin, unless you could have somebody who is almost volunteering to do something, you know, an intern or something, that may be a project. So what were you talking about?
I'm thinking more in line of the journal because the listing of the legislation is effectively already online right now. I mean, you can go to any one of the years. The one thing that would be nice about a spreadsheet covering multiple years is you can do a search of that. And I don't know what the capabilities of the IT department here at the city is, but you know, the city is fortunate. They have a full-time IT department with, you know, more than one person in, as far as I can tell. And so when you look at scanning documents and putting them into PDF, I mean, to me, unless those journals, if they want to start at a point in time, start here. You don't have to go back for the last 50 years as long as it's available here. I'm more interested in moving forward into the future. You know, they have some kind of a standard so that what our city does is available out there. So. And the idea of an intern is a great idea too. I mean, I've seen cities do that for projects like that, just so that it is available. And, you know, storage space is getting a lot less expensive than it used to be. And things of that nature, maybe out in the cloud, they can eventually put those out there too. Eventually, I'm looking at trying to make things easier here because if I could search for it without involving Shannon and department heads and everything else, I'm going to save them more time and energy than it's going to take to just scan stuff in and put it in the PDF.
Yes, Sally.
I think by the next meeting, I might be, there at one time was this exactly what we're talking about on the internet, absolutely. It listed the ordinance, it listed the name of the person who made the motion, it voted, it listed the yeas and the nays, and it was done by year. I found it on there. I don't know, did you ever find it, Lauren? I found it.
It goes back a long time.
I found it, and there is, and if I can pull it up again, I'll print it. It was at one time on the internet. It was on there.
Mayor, is that online on that site that we also keep our charter on and that everybody else keeps their charters on?
What specifically?
This came under the council. If you clicked onto the council and you go into their documents, I don't know why it's listed that way. Warren, maybe you can help me. If you go on the original page and it says council, legislation, library, if you go on council or government, it'll bring up council and bring up all their pictures. Then it talks about their legislation for the year 2001 to 2000. You click on anyone. Early on,
Yeah, that's out there, but it's only in one place where you get that listing, kind of like what Gary has, where it'll just list for the whole year.
It's there, or it's been there. It's not there for the latest, most recent years, though.
I don't know. I didn't look that
And
close.
one other point I want to make, not a debate. This comes from the municipal government of Ohio, and it identifies the process under the Constitution of election to adopt the charter or make amendments. After the work of the Charter Commission is completed, it has prepared a legal document known as the proposed charter or the changes. The submission of the issue of whether or not the particular charter proposed by the Charter Commission shall be adopted. That would be your amendments. The election on the adoption of the charter will be held at a date fixed by the commission. You fix the date of the election. Maybe a general, primary, or special election within 1 year after you make the recommendation. So it has to be done, because this is constitutional power. This has nothing to do with legislative process.
So I have a question. This is Drew again. So are you saying then that the charter we have is incorrect by state law? When it says the council shall by a affirmative vote of 5 or more of its members submit to the electors any proposed amendment?
After you make the legal document to them, that's where you vote. You
Right.
say, this is our, we have voted, and this is our legal document of your 5 months collection of information. And this, in the process of doing this, you're always in touch with the law director. He's always telling you, this is what we want, and they say, how should we write it? He writes the ordinances, you amend them, you correct them, it's back and forth. Your law director is very involved with you, right, Russ? And if you say that's not exactly what we mean this, then he amends that ordinance. But after you make the decision it's not amended, you have to sign off on all those. And once you sign off on them, then it's reduced down to a ballot. I saw a ballot just recently that was adopted, changed the charter. It didn't even have the section.
So one of the questions I have then, because this is Drew again. One of the questions I have is I read the minutes from the last charter review, and I know there was a question on this. Is once we come up with the charter amendments, do they automatically go to the ballot, in your opinion?
If your law director's keeping abreast of you, and he tells you, yes, I'll write that ordinance to satisfy what you recommend. You know, you're the recommending body, you're the Constitution here today, not council, because you're doing this for the people. Once you say, yes, Mr. Law Director, you have said exactly what we want to say in our legislation, and now reduce those 3 pages to 4 sentences on the ballot. Make sure, because it says that it should be reduced into a reasonable ballot. But just say, do you want to change the charter? Yes, no. You gotta say at least a section.
Thank you.
I have a couple comments here. For one thing, after we submit it to the Board of Elections, they sometimes change our ballot language.
You have to sign off on it,
Yeah.
and so does the Secretary of State.
Absolutely, but believe me, once they change it, they don't want it coming back for us for revision.
have-
They
you
send it
have a
to us and they
responsibility
say,
to do
this is
that.
what we want. Also, I have, Mr. Chairman, a point of order here. Are we going according to Robert rules? We have public participation and then it's supposed to be a charter review commission meeting?
We are, and I think we were still kind of in the old business thing, but we are getting up and we are getting behind schedule too, so
I questioned that in your first meeting. You-
No, right, and I did say that you'd be able to address things, absolutely,
Okay, thanks. During the meeting? Is that,
during the meeting. I mean, we've done that before in the,
all right,
The
well, it's
charter
your
review of the
meeting.
past.
Just want to know what the rules are here because this could go on for a very long
Yeah,
time.
No,
you know, Russ, I really think that's something that we should discuss and vote on. How we're gonna run these meetings.
I'm all for that.
Yeah, because, you know, I don't want to have to be on you to make that decision, you know. But, I mean, I don't know if we have to discuss it right now, but we should discuss the format of the meeting. If people like the way it is, or if they want discussion in the beginning, or throughout, or whatever, I think we need to have it.
This is Doug speaking. I would definitely propose audience participation at the beginning, but it is hard to follow jumping around section to section. If we can get in and go section by section, I think that's going to be a lot more productive. Certainly have as much feedback as possible, during those sections, but when we're on it, we should try to stay there.
Okay. Do you want to make a,
Oh, this is Jenny. I have not done the discussion yet. Yeah, to an extent, I think the Robert rules of order are very good. But considering what we're doing here, I know it's hard, but there is knowledge in the audience that can help us. It does slow things down if you just allow people to come in and talk at any point while we're reading through and discussing various sections. But what I might suggest is that we amend the agenda to allow comments at the end. So if there was something that we discussed, that possibly some comments might be made that would help us in a section we have just discussed, that be allowed, so that we do get that extra depth.
I think that would be a pretty good
Yeah.
compromise.
Right, right. I mean, I think it'll help us, because I think we're getting then the benefit of the wisdom that's available to us without really slowing down the meeting, because we can easily sidetrack and get off what our focus for that particular meeting is. But there are things that I think we could benefit and not wait until the next meeting for our audience participation. I think it would be better while it's all fresh, what we discussed in our minds, to allow a little feedback.
So Jenny, are you suggesting moving actually the audience participation to towards
no,
the end,
I'm
or
actually
having both
saying-
audience participation?
Actually, I'm saying allow a brief comment period and not to exceed 5 minutes per speaker at the end. Just to reflect on what we discussed, to add or supplement to what we discussed. Still allow audience participation at the beginning, because the agenda does state what we're going to be discussing.
At the end of each section or the
No,
end
at
of
the-
the meeting?
Before the meeting is adjourned, if any additional comments would like to be made relative to something that we discussed at that meeting.
So we would have audience participation, and then say after number 4 on our agenda, new business, and between number 5, miscellaneous, we would insert comments over what we just ran over from the audience with a 5-minute time limit?
Right. I think that something like that would be helpful to us.
Does anybody else have?
We just don't have the
I mean, if this was something like a normal council meeting, I don't think that would be necessary. But because what we are doing here is analyzing and looking at things and looking at changes to be made, I think it's beneficial to us to have this additional feedback, but to do it in a manner where it's not interfering with the flow of the meeting.
Yeah, I'd agree with Jenny, because I think it's a really good idea if we had, and to Doug's point, we had participation in the beginning, and then we could get through our sections that we need to get through. The audience can make notes of it, they can come back to us, if it's 5 minutes, like you said, and then we can go from there. Otherwise, it does, Doug's point, I think, it gets interrupted, and it's hard to go back.
I agree.
The continuity just isn't there.
What about substituting comments in miscellaneous?
Right, I mean, you could keep miscellaneous in there, and it could be something we check off after 5 seconds of consideration in a meeting. I mean, comments are really for the audience. Miscellaneous would be things that we would have to be bringing up.
So we would actually insert that behind miscellaneous?
I would put it in front of miscellaneous, right after
Okay.
we bring up the new business, and does that sound good?
Audience comments?
We can call it audience comments.
Since we've already had participation?
I think Jenny should make a motion for that.
Audience comments on parts of the charter reviewed that evening. How about we just make it a little more specific, like
Specific to that
Okay, so I make a motion that we insert on the agenda as item 5, audience comments to be limited to no more than 5 minutes per participant and relative only to information that was discussed during that evening's meeting.
So a motion is made by Jenny. Do I have a second?
I'll second.
Drew seconds it. I'm just gonna go right down. All in favor, say aye.